War. The representation of war in art is judged by criteria that may not be those of the artist. The pacifist demands an adequate representation of war's horrors. The military demands meticulous accuracy in circumstantial detail of uniform and equipment. The politician will demand that the balance of heroism and atrocity be weighted to the needs of propaganda. Despite all this, some artists have risen to the challenge of representing the effects and experiences of war in various ways through symbols, like Rubens or Goya, by concentration on the plight of the individual, Géricault, or by implication through the impact on the land, Paul Nash. As well as any political or ethical issues, the presentation of large numbers of figures in action presents the artist with a formidable technical challenge. Relief depicting two soldiers carrying the king's war chariot Assyrian, one of many military scenes from the palace of Sargon II, Khorsabad Vag 8th century BC. Gypsum, height 127 cm, Louvre, Paris, France. The Alexander mosaic Roman. This mosaic depicts Darius III at the Battle of Issus, 333 BC, where he fought against Alexander the Great. It is composed of over 1 million tesserae, small, colored tiles. 1st century BC mosaic, 342 by 529 cm, Museo Archeologico Nazionale, Naples, Italy. The burning of the Royal James at the Battle of Sol Bank, May 28, 1672. Willem van de Velde, the younger, the artist's practiced depiction of maritime scenes led to him painting sea battles from an English perspective for Charles IL, King of England. 17th century, oil on canvas, 106 by 153 cm, private collection. The Consequences of War. Peter Paul Rubens. Rubens contrasts the sumptuousness of his execution with the tragedy of his subject matter. 1637–38, oil on canvas, 206 by 342 cm, Palazzo Pitti, Florence, Italy. A night attack on the Sanjo Palace. Japanese school. This scroll illustrates the Heiji disturbance, a conflict between two Japanese warrior clans in 1159 13th century. Ink and color on paper, 41x670 cm, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, U.S. The Siege of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. Jean Fouquet. Fouquet was one of the most prominent painters of the 15th century, and this colorful biblical scene is typical of his illuminated manuscripts. Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris, France. The arrival of the Allied army at Ataparu, Paraguay. Candido López. López was a soldier, and war is a recurring subject of his work. The panoramic nature of this painting demonstrates the magnitude of this conflict between the Triple Alliance of Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay against Paraguay, 1864–1870. 1866, oil on canvas, Museo Histórico Nacional, Buenos Aires, Argentina. The wounded cuirassier Theodore Géricault. The ominous clouds in the background add to the emotional intensity of the scene. This painting is a fine example of Géricault's work, and of the romantic sensibility. The anonymous character is thought to represent the defeat of Napoleon's army. 1814, oil on canvas, 358 by 294 cm, Louvre, Paris, France. The Carnivorous Vulture, Plate 76 of The Disasters of War. Francisco de Goya. Goya's dark series of etchings, inspired by the Spanish War of Independence, is a disturbing insight into the horrors of war. 1810–14, etching. 18 by 22 cm, private collection. Balaclava. Lady Elizabeth Butler. This realistic presentation of the effects of war on its participants was controversial when first exhibited, not least because it was painted by a woman. 1876, oil on canvas, 59 by 76 cm, Manchester Art Gallery, UK. We are making a new world. Paul Nash. The blithe optimism of the title sits in bitter contrast to the barren landscape, ravaged by the effects of war. Nash's depictions of conflict were influenced by Vorticism. 1918, oil on canvas, 71 by 91 cm, Imperial War Museum, London, UK. The Battle of Midway. Jan Hamilton Finley. The artist created this tableau with the help of James Stoddart and James Boyd as a memorial to those lost in what became the most influential battle for supremacy in the Pacific during World War II. 1977, Mixed Media, Château d'Oyern, Love Valley, France. A barricade in the Rue de la Mortellerie, June 1848, memory of civil war. Ernest Meissonier. The realistic observation of this scene from the detailed cobblestones to the limp, lifeless bodies is notable for its emotional detachment. 1849, oil on canvas, 29 by 22 centimeters, Louvre, Paris, France. The defense of Sevastopol. Alexander Alexandrovich Dejnika gained the approval of the Soviet political establishment with his idealized representations of Russian soldiers in World War II. 1942, oil on canvas, 200 by 400 centimeters. State Russian Museum, St. Petersburg, Russia. Blue Baby, Blitz over Britain. Edward Burrough. Even in his representation of the destruction of war, Burrough retains a macabre sense of humor that is characteristic of his work. 1941, watercolor on paper, 69 by 102 centimeters, private collection. The first anti-war painting is often identified as Jacques Calot's Les Grandes Misères de la Guerre, The Miseries of War, published in 1633. While not depicting a specific battle, the series of 18 etchings powerfully portrays the devastating impact of the 30 Years' War on civilians in Lorraine, highlighting the suffering and destruction caused by war. While other works of art throughout history have depicted war, Calot's series is considered a landmark because it is among the earliest to focus on the human cost of conflict, rather than glorifying military victories or rulers. It emphasizes the brutality and pointless suffering inflicted on ordinary people, making it a potent anti-war statement. Here's why Les Grandes Misères de la Guerre is considered the first anti-war painting. Focus on civilian suffering. Unlike many earlier depictions of war that focused on battles and heroes, Calot's series shows the impact of war on ordinary people, including looting, rape, and murder. Rejection of glorification. The series doesn't celebrate any particular military achievement or leader. Instead, it critiques the destructive nature of war itself. Early example of social commentary. It's one of the earliest examples of art being used to critique social issues and challenge established power structures. While Francisco Goya's The Disasters of War, 1810–1820, is another powerful anti-war series, it was created much later and was not widely disseminated until the mid-19th century. Picasso's Guernica, 1937, is also a famous anti-war painting, but it came even later in history. Therefore, Les Grandes Misères de la Guerre is generally recognized as the first significant anti-war painting. One of the most notable early examples is The Raft of the Medusa, 1818–1819, by Theodore Géricault. While not explicitly about war, it portrays the aftermath of a shipwreck caused by incompetence and political failure, symbolizing the human suffering and the chaos that often results from disastrous decisions, which could be seen as an indirect critique of war and the political systems that cause such devastation. Another strong contender is The Battle of Anghiari, by Leonardo da Vinci, although it was never finished or preserved as an artwork in its entirety. It depicted the chaotic and violent nature of war, showing the brutal conflict between soldiers. Da Vinci, known for his skepticism about war, may have wanted to convey the destructive, inhuman aspects of combat. Moving into more modern and clear anti-war sentiments, Guernica, 1937, by Pablo Picasso is perhaps the most famous and iconic anti-war painting. Created in response to the bombing of the Basque town of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War, the painting conveys the horror, confusion, and suffering caused by war. Picasso's use of distorted figures and chaotic forms delivers a powerful message about the brutal consequences of violence and war, making it one of the most recognizable and powerful anti-war works in history. There were also many World War I and World War II era artworks that highlighted the horrors of war, such as works by German expressionist artists and members of the Dada movement. So, while there isn't a single, first, anti-war painting, many pieces throughout history have confronted and critiqued the destructive nature of war through vivid imagery, symbolism, and emotional intensity. What are your thoughts on these works? Do any resonate with you particularly?